first thing I want you to do is the POD. So you're evaluating the function when x is 3. Okay, so I want you to take a minute to do this at your seat, and then we'll go over it. Okay, when they ask you to evaluate, you're just substituting x equals 3 into your equation anywhere that you have an x. Just like we were doing before. You know, x, you plug it in to get y. Okay, so you can either plug this whole thing in your calculator. Okay, we're going to do it without. Following the order of operations, remember you want to do exponent first. So 3 squared, we know is 9. Okay, then we can multiply. So we have negative 2 times 9, which is negative 18. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. And then plus 10. So now we can just work left to right. So we know negative 18 minus 8, we have negative 26. Plus 10, so y equals negative 16. Okay, so again, when you know x, you can always just plug it in to get y. Okay, now I want you to go to your notes. Okay, so on Monday, actually on Friday and Monday, we learned to graph in standard form. So that was one way. Now we're going to learn to graph in vertex form. Okay, so just like in the name, it's going to tell you the vertex of your graph. Okay, so we're going to go over what all of these little colors mean here. So just like in standard form, the plus minus tells you if it's positive, we know our graph opens up, and if it's negative, it opens down. Okay, and still, just like standard form, only looking at A, just the number, not the sign out front. If A is greater than 1, we are narrow. If A is less than 1, we are wide. And if A is equal to 1, we are neither. So remember, you only look at the number, not the sign. Okay, if you remember that, you don't have to write that down. Okay, then you're pointing at the H. So H tells us our horizontal shift. Okay, so your horizontal shift. Okay, when you do this, you're thinking opposite. That negative means opposite. Remember negative B? We always said opposite of B. So horizontal shift, you're thinking opposite. So if you have a negative H, you're going to shift right. And if you have a positive H, you're going to shift left. The important thing here is to remember to think opposite. Okay, then we have K. K tells you your vertical shift. Okay, so if you have a positive K, so think vertical is your up and down. So positive numbers, those are up. negative k, the negative numbers, your vertical shift would be down. So we can get 4 different pieces of information just from our equation. Okay, and then vertex form. So to find vertex, it's the opposite of h, and k stays the same. So opposite of the inside. So opposite of your parentheses. And k is just stays the same. So remember, opposite, think opposite when you are thinking of the inside. Just like your horizontal shift, you're thinking opposite. So I would make sure that you highlight this part, put a box around it, star, something, because that will be very important that you know the negative hk. So we're going to use this to do a couple examples. Okay, so the first thing we do is find our vertex. So remember our vertex was negative h. Okay, and negative h meant the opposite of the inside. So the opposite of negative 3 we know is positive 3. And k, the outside, stays the same. So 3, negative 5. So the opposite of the inside, outside stays the same. And if I know the x of my vertex, just like in standard form, I know my line of symmetry, which is also my axis of symmetry, x equals 3. So I want to plot 3, negative 5, and draw my line of symmetry. So my vertical line right through my vertex. Okay, the next, if you notice, it says to evaluate a point. So to evaluate a point, okay, I'm going to write this at the top because there's a little bit more room. So to evaluate a point, you pick a number close to the x of your vertex. You want to make sure you write this down. This will be very helpful. So you pick a number close to the x of your vertex. So your line of symmetry at 3. What number would be close to 3? Right, you could pick 2 or you could pick 4. Does it matter which one you pick? No. You can pick either one. Because when you reflect it, it's going to be the same value. So I'm going to use 2. So I picked my number close to 3. So I picked 2. And if I know x, remember you can always plug that in to get y. So I have y equals 1/2 times 2 minus 3 squared, and then minus 5. So you can plug this whole thing into your calculator. Okay, or we can follow the order of operations. 2 minus 3 is negative 1 squared. We know is 1. So I have 1/2 times 1 minus 5. 1/2 times 1 is just 1/2. So 1/2 minus 5. I know y is negative 4 and 1/2. And it's okay to get a fraction. So my point is 2, negative 4, and 1/2. So I'm going to plot that. So 2, and then I want to go down to negative 4.5. And if I go left one, remember, just like in standard form, you reflect it. So you're going to flip it over your line of symmetry, and you can draw your parabola. Okay, and we still have a couple questions to answer. So my reflection point, so my evaluated point was 2, negative 4.5. When I reflected that over, I was at 4, negative 4 and 1/2. And it's okay if these are flipped, or if you used 1 and 3, that's okay too. It just depends what point you pick. Just always try to pick one that's 1 or 2 away from that x value so you know that it fits on your graph. Now to determine if it opens up or down. Okay, so say we didn't graph yet. I know that A is a positive 1/2 out front. So positive tells me it opens up, which means I have a minimum. And wide, narrow, or neither, you're just looking at the number, not the sign. So 1/2, which is less than 1, so we would be wide, which that was stated on our first slide, which I noticed that I skipped a problem, so we can go back to that one after this one. Okay, and then your horizontal shift. So remember, your horizontal shift, you're looking at H and you're thinking opposite. So think opposite. Okay, so the opposite of the inside, opposite of -3 is +3, which if you notice, from 0 to get to my vertex, I had to go right and down. So I know my horizontal shift was right and my vertical shift, so to get to -5 on my y, I had to move down. So as long as you have your vertex, you can look to see where x, to get to +3, you either go left or right. And since my positives are to the right, I know I have a horizontal shift to the right. Y is -5, so on my y-axis, I know the negative numbers are going down. Okay, so since I skipped one, let's go back to the first one here. Okay, I want you to do this one at your seat now. So we just did the second one together. We're going to go back and do this first one. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to start this one at your seat. So remember your vertex. You want the opposite of H, and the outside stays the same. Okay, so for my vertex, remember the opposite of H. So the opposite of +2, we know is -2. The outside K stays the same, -3. So I can plot -2, -3. Okay, and if I know the x of my vertex, remember you know your line of symmetry or axis of symmetry, it's the same thing. X equals -2, so I can draw a dashed line directly through my vertex in -2. So to evaluate a point, remember to evaluate a point, you're picking a number close to the x. So if I'm at -2, I could pick -1 or -3. So I'm going to use -1. And if we know x, remember you can plug it in to get y. So I have -1 plus 2 squared minus 3. So taking my order of operations here, I want to take care of parentheses first. So -1 plus 2, get 1 squared, which is 1, minus 3, I get -2. So I have the point of -1 negative 2. And if I can draw the right side of my graph, I know using my line of symmetry, I can reflect that to the other side. So if I went to the right one, I can go left one. So my reflection point will be negative 3, negative 2. Okay, and looking at my graph, or even looking at A, since you don't have a number in front, remember that's a positive 1. We know that opens up, which means this would be a minimum. And to determine if it's wide, narrow, or neither. Okay, that number in front, that 1, tells me if A is equal to 1, it is neither. Now your horizontal shift, this is where you look at your vertex. X is negative 2, so on your x-axis from 0, does negative 2 go to the left or to the right? Right, it goes to the left. And then my vertical shift, so now I'm looking at the y of my vertex, negative 3. So on your y-axis, are the negatives going up or going down? Right, they're going down, and just to double check, we can look at our graph. From 0, we went left and down to get to our vertex. So we do know that we filled that out correctly. Okay, so now I want you to go to the third one, y equals negative parentheses x minus 1 squared plus 5. Okay, I want you to do this one at your seat, and it's okay if you get a fraction for this one. Oh wait, nope, that's the last one, sorry. You do not want a fraction for this one, no fractions. Okay, so I want you to do this one at your seat. So remember your vertex, using the opposite of h, k stays the same. Okay, for this one, your vertex, the opposite of h, which if I go too fast, remember you can always pause the video, that's okay. So the opposite of h, the opposite of the inside, we know is positive 1. And k, the outside stays the same, so I'm at 1, 5. So if I know the x of my vertex is 1, I know my axis of symmetry or line of symmetry, x equals 1, so I can draw my, whoops, I can draw my AOS right through there. Okay, and to evaluate a point, remember, to evaluate a point, you're picking a number that's close to your x. So I'm going to use 0. Again, if you use a different number, that's fine. So if I know x is 0, I want to plug that in. And following my order of operations, parentheses first, so 0 minus 1, It's negative 1 squared, which is 1. Still keeping that negative out front, and we're going to drop it down, plus 5. So negative times 1, we know, is negative 1. Plus 5, we should get 4. So to evaluate a point, I'm at 0, 4. And if I can draw the left side of my graph, this line of symmetry right here tells me I can reflect it to the other side to get the right side. So making sure that's still curved and arrows on the end. So my reflection point, I'm at 2, 4. Okay, and again, if you have these two flipped, that's okay. Okay, it's the same thing. And we can tell this opens down, which means we have a maximum. Okay, and looking out front, you have a negative 1. So remember, the plus minus tells you how it opens, and then A is just the number. So since A is 1, we would be neither. My horizontal and vertical shift. So looking at my vertex, positive 1 for the x. Positive numbers on your x-axis, remember those move are on the right side. Your vertical shift at 5, y is 5, you are moving up. Just to double check, we'll look at our graph. From 0, we went right and up. So we do know that we filled that out correctly. Okay, so that's graphing in vertex form. So we can actually take vertex form and we can transform it into standard form. So you really could change it into standard form and graph that way also. So to do that, okay, look at your first example here. Y equals the quantity of x minus 3 squared. So one of the common misconceptions is that you can just take x squared and negative 3 squared, but we cannot do that. Okay, so think about what it means if something is squared. That means it's times itself. So really, we have y equals x minus 3 times itself, so x minus 3. So I don't know if any of you remember how to FOIL or distribute, okay? So normally when we distribute, it's something like this. And we just take that term out front and distribute it to both terms inside the parentheses. So now we're going to be doing that, except we have two terms. So we're going to focus for the first one. Take x times x, and we get x squared. Then we're going to take that x to the second term inside the parentheses. So x times negative 3, so negative 3x. Okay, that took care of both terms. So now I'm going to take my negative 3 times x, negative 3x, and take that negative 3 to the last term. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. So your next step is just to try to combine. So you're looking for like terms to simplify. So since I don't have any other squareds, I know I can drop that down. But I do have two x's. So negative 3x minus 3x, I get negative 6x, and I can just drop down my plus 9. So now this looks like standard form. So you can go back and forth between forms. Okay, so now if we look at this second one, okay, remember your order of operations. You take care of exponents first. So I have my y equals negative 3. And I know when something is squared, that means I have it 2 times. So x plus 4 times x plus 4. So now that we have 3 terms, think about if I had y equals 2 times 3 times 4. How would you solve this? First, you would take 2 times 3, which would give you 6, and then take that times 4. So you're going to be doing the same thing for this. So first, I want you to focus on those first 2 terms. So negative 3 times the quantity of x plus 4. So I want you to distribute this. Okay, and you're going to drop it down right underneath. So I have negative 3x minus 12. Okay, so now that's gone, and I can drop down x plus 4. Now this looks just like the problem we did over here. So I want you to distribute and simplify this one at your seat. Okay, so if I would distribute, I have negative 3x times x. So I have negative 3x squared. Negative 3x times 4, so minus 12x. Then I'm going to take negative 12 times x, minus 12x. And negative 12 times positive 4, which is negative 48. So now I'm just looking to combine. So I have y equals, I don't have any other x squareds. But I do have two x's, so I know minus 24x. And then I can drop down my minus 48. Okay, let's look at the next two, your last two. Okay, still following order of operations. Do you take care of your exponent first or do you add? Right, you want to take care of your exponent first. So if you have x minus 6 squared, remember that means x minus 6 times x minus 6. Okay, so I want you to distribute this first. Once you distribute, you're just going to tack on that plus 3 at the end when you're combining to simplify. So I want you to distribute the x minus 6 times x minus 6. Okay, so if I distribute that, I have x times x, so x squared, x times negative 6, negative 6 times x, and negative 6 times negative 6. Okay, so now we can just combine. So I know y equals, I don't have any other squareds. I have negative 6x minus 6x, so minus 12x, and then 36 plus 3. So plus 39. So now you notice the last one is combining those three types we did. So when you just had one parentheses squared, then we added the term out front, and then we added one at the end. So now, remember, following your order of operations, take care of your exponent first, okay? So we have negative 4 x plus 1 times x plus 1 minus 9. Okay, so now I want you to do this at your seat. Remember, you want to do the first two terms first. Okay, and you will just drop that down, whatever you get, and then you're going to drop down the rest. And then it's going to look just like the problem we did over here. So I want you to do this one at your seat. Okay, so we have negative 4x minus 4. Now we can focus on these two parentheses. So I have negative 4x times x, negative 4x squared, minus 4x, minus 4x, minus 4, and I can just drop down my minus 9. Now we're just combining. So y equals, I don't have any other squareds, but I can combine my x's. So minus 8x and minus 13. Okay, so now that we've done a couple examples of each, okay, you're going to get a worksheet. 4.2 graphing quadratics in vertex form. Okay, so on your homework, on number 4, so number 4 on homework, you're evaluating a point. Depending on what you pick, could be a fraction. So if you get a fraction, that is okay. Oops, could be a fraction. Make sure that you are showing me that you are actually picking a value for x and plugging it in. Okay, I have to see some work how you get that evaluating a point. Okay, make sure you answer all the questions. Whatever you do not finish is homework. So what you don't finish is homework. Okay, the sub, Mrs. Eitzman, she'll be coming around on Thursday morning checking to see that you have your worksheet done. Okay, if it's not done, I'll already know whether it was done or not. So I want you to finish it and then you can turn it in the regular bin. So you don't have to fill out a yellow sheet. Since she's marking it down on the paper, I'll know whether you completed it or not. But once you turn it in the bin, you can get your points back. So make sure that you are finishing the worksheet and turning it in. Okay, if you need to, you can always watch the video again. That is perfectly fine.